All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mella's Diner. This is the 4th episode of Mella's Diner. It's a Orthodox panel show. I don't know if we need any more of those around, but lo and behold, here we are. I have a feeling that this episode is going to be a little bit different from the other ones, but I'm very excited for that. It's great to have Christina. She's a returning guest from Orthodox Family Life. Good morning, Christina. How are you doing?
Hi, Mella. Great. Thanks for having this. It's going to be a fun one, I think. And yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here and for your flexibility on the matter and everything.
Sure.
And we have brand new to the show. He's muted. I hope he'll unmute before he says anything. But this is Posh Redneck. Hello, Posh. How are you? And good evening.
Hello. I suppose I'm supposed to say it like that now.
Yes, you are. I wish I had Jim Bob's little intro thing for you. That was so funny. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he has the intro. Just so you know, Jim Bob is the same, not just on when he's on stage, because when we had some prep work for debates, and we would have like a video call to discuss things and to prep. I would go out to the bathroom or something, and when I come back, he would play the thing. So yeah,
he's awesome. I hope to one day talk to him too. He's just so great.
He's generous with his time, just so people know. I'm not setting him up to have 100 invites by saying that.
Well, yeah, I first came across you when you were making regular appearances on his show. And then you started your own channel, and you also started a show with Bearing Strawberry. I don't think that you're doing that enough, but what are you up to these days?
Well, for people who don't know, since December, I've been working for The Crucible. So I've been helping Andrew do debate preparations, with a paid thing. So not just, hey, let's get together and do an hour or so. Yeah. That and research. So I've been doing that. People have been giving decent feedback. There has been an upgrade in theological argumentation. So that's what I've been doing. And I want to do more streams on geopolitics, but I'm the type of person who gives it a couple of days to recuperate, to get some proper reporting and analysis in. But there is no 3 days without a major, history-changing event happening. So I can't, I can't do anything other than, with Baron, we do something a bit fun.
But, more cultural, social kind of commentary.
Yes, I've got my birthday is next week, and I'm thinking of doing a stream on complete dismantlement of Christian Zionism of every type. So that's what I've been preparing for, to do a big stream on that.
That's awesome. Very much needed today, I think.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. And Christina, would you like to share more about what you're doing on Orthodox Family Life on your channel over there?
Sure. I make content for mostly Orthodox women and families, different types of content. So I read the lives of the saints. I really feel like all of the issues we're having with relationships in the world could be corrected if people read the lives of the saints and use that as the model. And so I read those so that they're easy for people to find, again, specifically for women and families. And then we have also some panels and interviews that I do. And occasionally I put out my own stuff on like homeschooling or don't give your kid advice, really obvious advice that is still needed, unfortunately.
Yeah, yes. So if Mella is busy, I'm happy to entertain talking to you.
Sure.
So as someone who is fairly present in circles of like education and presenting things, especially with languages, I've been learning Irish for the last couple of months. So in homeschooling, I'm not sure how do you handle teaching languages?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because homeschooling in the last few years, especially, has radically changed. And so I'm kind of more of the old guard with homeschooling, where I'm pretty rigid. And I am not a language person. I have a little bit of dyslexia, so I'm often at a loss for words or can't find the word I want. But so I hire somebody to do that. So I have some kids that have learned Greek, and Russian, and one who actually did start with Irish for a little while. She was doing Irish dancing. We look very Irish in our family, so it was adorable. But she only dabbled in that. But yeah, if we were serious, we would just take a class. There's a lot of great online resources like Classical Learning Resource Center, which is an Orthodox run place. That's kind of the first big online Orthodox school for homeschoolers. But there are others now.
Outstanding.
So yeah, and we have some local people that teach Greek and stuff. So we're all doing a little bit.
Posh, do they allow homeschooling in Serbia?
It's not been needed, but I've not heard of anyone doing it. So please understand that we have radically different social norms. So people are still very conservative on our end, including, by the way, the communists. Like we don't have, in fact, this might sound strange to people, but I've mentioned it before. Communist and socialist groups here consider the LGBT agenda to be right-wing because it's Western cultural imperialism.
Wow.
Which might sound completely radical to people in the West, right? But socialism was never very friendly towards the LGBT agenda, right? They did decriminalize it, for example. Lenin did so in the Soviet Union, but you would be locked up in an asylum for homosexual activities. So we don't have a problem with even leftists pushing it. The government is, because the government is a Western stooge, but even they are extraordinarily limited. Basically, the only thing they can do is have the Pride Parade every so often. And like 20 people participate and like thousands of police.
Yeah, we unfortunately have very large pride parades. I was in Sacramento for many years, and a friend of mine convinced me to kind of go on a little mom's weekend together. So we went and stayed in this really nice timeshare or something she had in the city. And unfortunately, it was the Pride Parade weekend, and we had no idea. So here, my female friend and I are walking around together, and it's pretty horrifying to see in real life. And then we stopped taking our family to San Francisco after that because every time we went, we saw naked people, like grown men. So it was pretty gross.
We don't have that, but people, we have literally thousands of police members because if you didn't, let's just say that. But the thing also is the church here organizes what they call a porodična šetnja, which means like a family procession, walk, whatever you want to call it, where it's basically a litany, because from the Orthodox perspective, a pride parade is a demonic litany. So the church organizes a holy litany, and they put pregnant women like at the forefront, not the very forefront. That would be a bit disturbing. But after all the clergy and the very avant-garde of the procession, you have like women with families and the husbands of that. So that's how the church reacts in a non-violent manner. The first time we had a pride parade years and years ago, I remember my priest, who's a very stern man generally. Yes, stern man, not as an unloving. He's a very loving person. He's got 7 children, and but that comes with being very disciplinary. And I remember he never went on some type of aggressive rant about it or anything. He just said, pray for those people because they are deep in the clutches of the demonic. And that's what we should do. And I keep forgetting to put on my glasses. I wear glasses now.
From all the research you're doing. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. And I'm glad you said that, being stern is different than being mean. And I wish more parents knew that. You should be stern with your children. You can be loving and stern at the same time.
Yes. My parents were always even lenient from my perspective now that I look back on it. But it was always, listen, we will establish a reciprocity. you will behave, and you want to stay over at a friend's house, when we're teenagers, you can do so. Just make sure to let us know you're doing so, right? Because I'm also pretty aware that a lot of children don't, they develop this reactionary function. It's something we all remember as teenagers. Like being a teenager is like being a psychopath, because you get the hormones start running, right?
Yes.
And you have no prior experience to it. Everything is changing. Everything is new to you in those terms. Like my voice changed from like to this in a matter of a month. And that's a huge change, not to mention like growing pains. I remember because, there's a differential in how quickly muscles and bones develop. So you have the growing pains. And I remember for a month, I could barely walk. I had a huge ache in my right hip because of, again, the differential. Things develop. I grew like 3 inches in a summer. It was insane.
Wow.
But you're basically a psychopath because you have no wisdom to deal with all the changes, all the impulses that are coming. It's all new. It's all at very high levels. And I don't think that just clamping down on it, punching down, is going to help. I know people who had far more stern parents than myself, who ended up completely breaking apart because they were off the leash the moment their parents weren't there to supervise. And in Orthodoxy, hierarchy is a hierarchy of love, not a hierarchy of some type of oppression. Now, banning things might seem oppressive, and it is in a certain sense, but if done lovingly, it ends up in wonderful things. So I've never created some type of problem the way I've seen things with people who grew up with sterner parents. So I think that's a difficult frequency to maintain, but it's beautiful if done correctly. And my priest is the highlight of that, as far as I can see.
Well, we're definitely in danger of rabbit trailing here because I'm on this trail with you. These are topics near and dear to my own heart, and I've done a lot of thinking about it. And sorry, Mel, I have to say a few words about everything Posh just said because he's absolutely correct. But I would also argue that the teenager is a modern invention. That's one issue, and then we have the puberty is hitting kids at younger and younger ages, and the younger it hits them, the less maturity they have. And this is why you see 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds going through puberty and just being terrible. This is the whole Sephora, part of the Sephora issue, if you've heard of that. There's a lot to this, but I do think that we give our children damning or damaging influences, and then we're really surprised when they rebel. It's like, well, because you damaged them and you gave them a bunch of things they should never have had access to. So I have raised 4 kids. My youngest is 17. And I can honestly say none of them rebelled. Thank God. They had their own little, I'm talking about full scale rebellion, but there's a give and a take. And I think a parent, you have a lot of power in the beginning, but as your children grow older, you have less power. And hopefully your influence increases to where your children want to listen to you because you listen to them and love them and, have given your life for them. So
yes.
I'm going to try not to say anything else, but I'm so glad you said all of that, Posh. It's absolutely true.
I have to continue that, Mella. Sorry.
Sorry,
I'm
Mella.
Doing this consciously. So it's not just me going off on tangents. I remember learning about this fact about going into puberty earlier by when I was in high school, and my music professor mentioned how much longer boys would stay in the Vienna boys choir.
Oh, yeah.
Because they have a boys choir. Like lots of places have children's just choirs made up just of children. We have one in Serbia called Kolibri, which means hummingbird. And and it's beautiful. You've probably heard the victory chant on the internet, right? So, but they used to stay there until like 15, 16, maybe even 17, and now it's much earlier than that. And if in danger of opening a rabbit hole, I've heard so many people argue online, and they would mention research of like, pardon my French, but sexologists. And I trust those women who sell healing crystals more than I trust sexologists. I think the only less credible people are evolutionary psychologists. But they say, oh, they presented silhouettes of women, and the ones rated most favorably were 14-year-old girls. And I first, my opinion is, yeah, they're doing something to fudge the numbers. And I remember some of my experiences in my life. I remember meeting this girl in it's a family that's very closely related to them, not by blood, but a friendly family. I'm losing my regular English words, but and it's this girl, and I would not have guessed she was 14 because she was fully developed physically, and she was 6 foot tall, so barely shorter than me. And she was 14, but it's because she had an early growth spur, right? That means that those sexologists can pick out those types of girls who have developed early, right? So they don't have a regular 14-year-old's body, create their silhouette, and then present like older women who are not particularly attractive, figure-wise, and get a result so that they can promote this type of absolute garbage. And that's what I think happened with that. Because it's all a scummy behavior, such disgusting, vile things, but they have a methodology to make it seem credible, and the early growth spurs are, I think, a part of that.
Yeah, I agree totally, and we don't help by giving our children movies and dolls that are completely inappropriate and are dressed like prostitutes. Why are you doing that?
Absolutely.
From Barbie to the monster dolls, Bratz, all up the line.
Especially with girls, because with boys you give them like action figures. Boys don't conceive of such a thing. I know myself, growing up, I didn't have like a muscular action figure and thought, oh, I'd look so great with this. I just thought it looked awesome. That's the word for it. Like, it's cool. But we see the types of dysmorphic tendencies that are brought about in young girls by all the internet stuff, all the filters. Now we have AI, which absolutely worsens things 100. But these girls and women who present themselves, and with girls, it's mostly social shaming and bullying. That how they bully each other. With men, you just punch someone, recover. Men can be friends after that. But if your social destruction is part of it, you create these images of false images and false idols and false personalities. And with the gender that does mostly social bullying, that's far more damaging than the other.
Yeah. I feel like girls, they really want to emulate what is most valued in society, which is something I actually wanted to talk about when we were going to bring up the life of women in the Roman Empire. So hopefully we can.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, who I am. I'm Mella. I've been in the Orthodox chats for a little bit, a couple years. So I'm just learning. And right now I'm kind of getting into Father John Strickland's book series. Are you familiar with this, Posh?
No, I have not read this.
Oh, okay. But he's a personal friend of yours, right, Christina?
He is. He converted. I think his godfather is our parish priest and my son's godfather, and he converted, I think, about 25 years ago. So we knew him in those early years, and he's, I can honestly say, he's a fantastic pastor. He's the image of being a pastor, really. Very kind and loves his people.
That's awesome. Oh, go ahead, Posh.
I don't know of his work. I've heard, of course, about him, of course. But I know a lot about Greece and Rome.
Okay.
And if you thought Islam was harsh on women, you've not researched Greco-Roman view of women.
Exactly. Yeah, I really do want to touch on all that. But before we get into that, I really wanted to jump into the early Christian martyrs. And, as I've been catechized and kind of reading the lives of the saints, I kind of take it for granted that the persecutions of the Christians even happened. Because to me, it seems like the values of, the Romans, they're all about bravado and power and, honor. And so the Christians must have seemed kind of like weak and pacifist. So, and they were like a catacomb church, as Father Strickland kind of points out in the book. They were like underground. In fact, he says that there's an estimate of the women being like 5-to-1 ratio in the church. Like it was mostly women in the beginning. And I just feel like it shouldn't have been such a threat. But, and even like Pontius, well, yeah, let's talk about it. Because even Pontius Pilate didn't seem to be super concerned about the crucifixion of Christ. It just seemed kind of like an appeasement, to all the haters at the time. So I wanted to ask you guys, why did the persecutions even begin on a mass scale, like as an official campaign 10 times? Why did that happen?
I can start.
You can start, yeah, sure.
So here's the thing. I think the first problem with your expectations was that you think of Roman paganism as basically you Christianize it too much. You might think of it as like Christianity, because there's always fundamental ethics we can agree on, but they have multiple like gods, and there are aspects of nature or even sociocultural phenomena. War isn't exactly nature; it's purely anthropogenic. One might argue, chimp troops fighting each other or ant colonies going at each other, but war as war is very human. But that's not what it is. There's a problem that people might not understand. Pagan people were not cynical in their paganism. Most objections I hear seem to me like, oh, you think they're just pretending to do things because obviously no one believes there's a Mars, there's a Venus, there's a this and that and the other. But no, they were very serious. Like they would not go to war because the haruspex would analyze a liver and it had a spot on it. So they were very superstitious.
Yes.
But at the same time, I talked about this quite a bit, about their idea of morality was based around strength and power. So it wasn't about compassion. Anyone who ever says, well, we hear this from atheists, right, all the time. Like, we can all agree that, do I have to explain to you why murder is wrong? Well, pagan cultures didn't see murder as wrong, I'll say, right, as a category in itself. They viewed murder as wrong as far as it can damage social dynamics, or if you kill someone important, but killing like your slaves or something, what's the problem with that? They're your property. So the idea was, and this is separate from Pontius Pilate, I'll get to that a bit later, but when you have Greco-Roman social dynamics, people have to understand that there's an ontological understanding of aristocracy. Aristocracy was not seen as people with power purely. It was seen as people who are favored by the gods.
Yeah. Mhm.
So in the pagan world, if you're born healthy, strong, tall, handsome, intelligent, gifted in certain things, those are seen as favor of the gods. But there's a flip side to that, which is if you were none of that or the inverse of that, you are abandoned by the gods, and you're pathetic, and you're to be trampled upon. There's no. That's why you don't find pagan stories about being, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, right? No, you're either from a noble family or you're some type of descendant from a deity, right? So that's a crucial part of understanding pagan societies. They have an ontological understanding of nobility, of royalty,
Yeah.
which didn't exist even in Christian feudalism. There was obviously the idea of blue blood and stuff, but not on an ontological level. So when you see Pontius Pilate, his job was just to maintain peace. Romans don't care about anyone else. You can be these snappy little Jews as long as you behave, and not just Jews. I'm not singling them out. When St. Paul writes to the Corinthians, he's writing to a Corinth that was demolished by the Romans because of rebellion and rebuilt. So it's not the same Corinth as ancient Corinth. And just to be clear to everyone, Jerusalem was demolished in 70 AD and rebuilt and was renamed Jerusalem until centuries later. But this understanding of ontological aristocracy is crucial.
Mhm.
And also crucial is this is a time of the Roman Imperium, which is, again, a descendant of the Roman Republic. And the Emperor of Rome, not the king, the term king we find in the epistles of St. Peter, and it's an insult, because that Sic semper tyrannis, that whole thing about tyrants, that's referring to the period of kings, and they saw them as tyrannical, but not the emperor, who actually had more power than the kings did in the period of the Roman kingdom. But nevertheless, he was the Pontifex Maximus. He was the great bridge builder, because he is a god emperor. He is a deity. He is the bridge between the divine and the human. So what you would expect of all the subjects of the Imperium, they can have their little fun. Again, they can have most of the sects. There were some sects that the Romans found detestable and clamped down on, non-Christian ones, I mean. But you were expected to at least burn some incense for the genius of the emperor. And a genius is like a muse. It's like a spirit attached to it. And if you refused, you were a traitor. That's how they view it. So for the non-Christians and non-Jews of the time, that wouldn't be a problem. The pagans recognized other gods. They just thought, yeah, that they're your gods, and when we're at war, whose gods are more powerful, they prevail. But if you refuse to sacrifice to the emperor, then you're a traitor, and that is where things come to hostilities, because treason is a high crime in today's world, but our constitutions and whichever type of system you have are different than back in the day. And this is also why the back of the Roman religion was broken by the conversion of Emperor Saint Constantine the Great, because now your high priest has rejected all your gods, and you can't just say, well, let's get rid of him because he's the high priest.
Can I add a couple of things, Posh, to what you just
Absolutely.
said? So if you think about the Lord's trials in front of the Jews and the Roman trials, and they're multiple, if you do a careful reading of that, This is exactly what you're saying. This is exactly what they actually accuse him of on the Roman side is, if you make yourself the son of God, then you're no friend of, if you allow this man to claim this, then you're no friend of Caesar. So this is the trick that the Jews use on the Romans to force their hand in crucifying the Lord. It's not what he was accused of the Jewish trial, which was making himself equal to God, which of course is true. So there's that. But also, as Posh was saying, if you read the lives of the early martyrs, this forcing the population to offer incense to the gods was routinely done to flush out the Christian population. And oftentimes in the lives, you'll hear them say, well, the friends of the martyr will say, well, just throw the incense on. It's okay. You can still believe what you want. Just throw a little incense. And of course, they always refused. And going back to what you were saying about the physical beauty of and how important that was to the Romans, if you read the lives of the early martyrs, which if you think they're all similar, they're not. There's a lot of variety and rich detail in these lives. So you really have to go and read them for yourself. But they will often start the description of that martyr with how beautiful and full of wisdom and virtuous and everything Posh was just saying. And I have to wonder if that isn't to maybe push back against the idea that the Christians were low class and stupid and ugly and nothing. They said, actually, here's all of these really high level officials and, Saint Catherine of Alexandria, right? Saint George. There's just, the court is actually full of beautiful, young, intelligent Christians. And I think this helps to convert the people as well. So just wanted to add that.
Yes, to continue on that, I'm from a city called Procopia, named after Saint Procopius, who has there are multiple Saint Procopiuses, but the great martyr Procopius, who had a sort of a halfway between Saint Augustine and maybe Saint Paul. Right, raised by his father was a pagan, his mother was a Christian, which meant he was raised as a pagan. We're talking about Roman patriarchy. No jokes about that. It's a very strict system of the paterfamilias, right? We can decide. Do I read that? Okay.
I'm just popping stuff up on screen. Okay. You can ignore it. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I just want to know if I should engage with it. Right, and he later on converts, also has a sort of a Constantine, moment, like with this sign you shall win, similar to that. But yes, the martyrs, early martyrs, were so diverse for so many reasons, and they refused to burn incense, which seems so trivial nowadays because we're so desensitized to what that means. But apart from that, there is also an element of, how shall we say, of Roman society, that it wasn't just hostile to Christianity, because Romans at this point, they were the largesse of the empire, and I don't think we have a comparison to it. It's like even America nowadays can't compare to the fact that how much more powerful they were than anyone around them. Right? You had maybe China in the Far East, and there were just a few liaisons, like some travelers between the two. So they never had anyone nearly as powerful as them near them, which gives you a largesse, and that gave birth to this almost like what we would call like liberalism, but this idea that they really liked old stuff. We see that nowadays with the decadence we have, like people like getting back to neo-paganism or something. That's the modern iteration of it. But Romans really liked old religions. So they really liked things from Egypt, from the Middle East, and Judaism itself. That's why you had a lot of Roman patronage of synagogues, because for them, they were pagans. They didn't care if you believed only in one God. Like, they wouldn't appreciate the lack of reciprocity. I don't know if you might remember, like, from Daniel, when he was the high advisor to Cyrus, and he had two pagans beneath him. So the three were like the some type of high council or something. And the two people below him convince Cyrus to implement a system where for 1 month of the year, only he can be worshipped because he's a god, right? Like, we're talking about the Persians now, but still pagan. And he accepts, not understanding at the time, Cyrus is such a fascinating figure to me, but doesn't realize that Daniel would refuse. And he really liked Daniel. And of course, Daniel refuses, and that's how he ends up, in the pit, in the cave with the lions. And he goes out early in the morning to see if he's still alive. But we see this even in the Old Testament, right? So it isn't just Christianity, but Christianity, we would say, is what Daniel practiced, right? The religion of the coming of the Messiah. That's what Christ means. It means Messiah. But even with that fascination with old things, like in the Civil War, Roman Civil War, that's how Saint Paul gets his citizenship in Rome, because he was a Jew from Tarsus, and Jews there got citizenship by supporting Caesar in the Civil War. That was their reward. And Pompey, on the other hand, he was the one who annexed Judea, including Jerusalem. And he went into the temple and into the Holy of Holies, which again, no one should enter except for the high priest once a year. And I say to people, good luck telling a Roman general that. So he goes in there, and the temple itself, which is in the Old Testament, isn't a very favorable thing in God's eyes. He preferred the tabernacle, he preferred the tent, but he condescends to accepting the temple, and Solomon messes up the consecration of it, because he says something like, may all who pray towards this temple have their wishes granted. And God's like, yeah, no. That's not how this works. Because that's a very pagan thinking. And we see that in Islam to this day. But the temple is built like a Phoenician temple, right? That's how it was constructed. Right, and in the Holy of Holies, the Phoenicians would have, and the Romans and the Greeks, like all the temples around the world for advanced civilizations. There were non-advanced civilizations who didn't build massive structures, obviously, but we see a pattern even in those. But you had what is the equivalent of an altar in our churches, and there would be an idol there. And when Pompey goes in and sees nothing, right? Usually it was just the Ark of the Covenant there. And he was fascinated, because he thought, oh, these people worship sola mentis, which means by mind alone. So that's how the Romans viewed it. But so again, with all of this fascination with old stuff, ancient stuff, exotic stuff, you still had to have some obeisance to the Roman system. That's the only thing they asked for. You pay your dues and show your allegiance, and you're good. Never ever rebel.
So Posh, Would you say that the Christians were used as a scapegoat because they were not doing that? I mean, if you think about
No.
Nero and the fire and stuff like that.
I think that's a bit too cynical, because
Okay.
you have to think, oh, the pagans, they didn't actually believe this stuff. That's a very modern way of approaching it. Because when you had the desecration of the temple, with the sacrificing of pigs to Zeus in the temple, right? That's a biblical event. That happened when the Seleucids were invading the Ptolemaic Empire. So it was basically Seleucus and Ptolemy were two of the generals of Alexander. So the Seleucids controlled the modern Middle East, so to categorize it broadly, and the Ptolemaic dynasty controlled Egypt and the surrounding areas. So the Seleucids invaded the Ptolemies, and they failed. What was their conclusion? Someone did not sacrifice to the gods properly. Someone didn't give proper heed to the gods, their due. And when they figured out, oh wait, so these fellows over here only worship one god and didn't give the sacrifices to the gods, oh yeah, that's why we failed. So they go and sacrifice pigs to Zeus in the temple, which is the last time the Holy Spirit is present in the temple. It's a different thing, right? Everyone had their theories on how to get him back in. The Pharisees thought they could be as pure as possible and kill all the sinners. The Sadducees, they were all Hellenized, so who the hell cares? But they had their different theories. The Essenes abandoned the whole thing completely and went into the desert. But what you have is a pagan thinking. So if you don't obey the gods, they punish you, or at least don't help you out. They're not on your side. They don't have to be against you, but they're not on your side. So when we say Christians were just scapegoats or the Jews were just scapegoats, we're unwittingly ascribing cynicism to pagans. And I wouldn't do that. Maybe some were, maybe some weren't. But as a rule of thumb, to just say, oh no, Christians were just scapegoats. No, demons set up these pagan systems to be against God. You don't need cynicism for it. So we have things like when the military expedition into Germania, today be roughly Germany, we had Romans, throwing rocks at the temple of Mars because Mars failed them, and the temple is a body of the god, right? So they were trying to damage the god as retribution for this lack of assistance. So I wouldn't describe cynicism. I think it's worse what they did, but it's all demonic in nature, as all paganism is.
Yeah, I agree. It's all demonic in nature, and I don't have a problem with anything you just said. The only little thing I would push back on is, and I was just reading this in the Life of the Saint, and forgive me, I can't remember who it is, but if I find it, I'll send it to you, Posh and Mella. And it was the life of a saint, but it gave the backstory of, I thought it was Nero, and it actually went into pretty detailed historical narrative about, the court intrigue that was going on that was nudging him to scapegoat the Christians. I believe it was Nero. It could have been someone later. So I'm gonna try to find that. So, but both things can be true. I mean, the demons are going to use any tool they have. But I get your point. It's not the main
not
thing.
Necessarily scapegoating. That was my point. It could have been partially, because again, throughout history, atheism is very recent, but that didn't stop people from being very cynical. So I just don't like to ascribe it as purely just political intrigue without factoring in things like, well, if you're a pagan, disrespecting the gods was a huge problem.
Right.
And pagans sacrificed even their children in places not in Rome, but to deities mostly pertaining to weather and fertility.
Yeah.
Because you'd rather sacrifice one child than have the god be angry with you, and then you lose all your children to horrible harvests.
Forgive me, I'm way too Southern. I have a hard time interrupting people, but when I read the lives of the saints, what I see is what changes the hearts of the pagan is that you have these people who are sometimes from the upper class, sometimes they're not, but they have such a strong voice. That clearly the Spirit of God is in them. And then we see these miracles especially the great martyrs, the people that are called great martyrs, where they're repeatedly tortured and they are repeatedly saved or healed from this. And, the persecutors often get very,
Sorry
kind of
to interrupt you just about that.
Sure.
Turn me around, I'm done on this side.
What's
when
that?
they were burning, who was it? Was it Saint Ignatius? He was being burned alive and says, "Flip me over, I'm done on this side."
Was that Saint Polycarp?
Right.
Maybe Polycarp. I don't know.
Could be. He was also burned. I don't know if I can't remember who exactly said it. Someone in the chat could remind us. But they were very defiant. Yes.
Yes, they didn't just suffer, but they kind of threw it back in the emperor's face many times, or whoever was tormenting them. And I recently read the life of Saint Christina on my channel, so forgive me. I'm going to retell the story because, again, the bad thing about the internet is you often get these little tiny clips, which makes all the saints sound alike. But if you read her full life, she was put in a tower. Her father was a pagan. He was the administrator of Tyre. She was put in a tower because she's very beautiful and knowledgeable, and he wanted to keep her from the world. But just by observing the natural world, she realized that there was one God and not many gods. And so she started praying for enlightenment to this one God. And so God enlightens her by sending an angel down to teach her. And eventually the parents come back up and they're like, okay, well, we're going to go to the temple now and worship, and you're going to do this too. And she refuses. And her dad being the magistrate, it's actually him that has to go through has to torture her until she gives in. But 2 times in her life, as they're pulling the chunks of flesh off her body, she picks it up and hurls it in his face. And I think one time she actually blinds somebody. So you think this is a young girl. She's a teenager. And yet she has such strength and such this amazed the pagans. It's like, these people shouldn't be able to do this. This is greater than everything. And when we take them into a temple and they trick us, they say they're going to worship, so we take them. All they do is pray and the idols fall. I mean, to me, this is why the church was born. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And I just finished with Saint Christina because as her father was throwing her into the water to drown her, she prays that God would make these waters the waters of her baptism. And so she's thrown in. The angels bring her to the surface, and then the Lord himself comes down and baptizes her himself. It's a beautiful icon. I've never seen this before, so it's on the thumbnail and in my channel for this. But this just shows you God can enlighten anybody and anywhere. So I just had to forgive me. I had to finish your story, but this is what changed in my opinion.
Yes, I'd like to throw in a couple of other vectors that contributed to it, but I'd like to mention Saint Nikolai Velimirovich, who's actually distantly related to me. But he said about relics is that when men fail, God rushes to reach us through dead things.
Even the stones will cry out.
Yes, that's what's the thing is. Like, that's what the point of relics. It's not magic. Nothing about Christianity is about magic. Magic is about controlling the world. Miracles are about God inviting us to himself. So many times I've heard this, and it's one of the most beautiful things you can remember. You think about miracles. If you go and partake of the Eucharist, you are going to a weekly miracle.
Mhm.
Right, so we think of miracles as something defying our expectations or whatever, but so many things we see as mundane that are miraculous. For example, the Eucharist. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
there's this guy with a beard and a black robe thingy, and he goes into the altar and he says some words and he brings out this bread and wine and water, and it's like a body of Christ. Like we so desacralize things. I think it was Saint Paisios who said that people today treat people of his day, when he was younger, treated the naphora, like the cubed bread you get after taking
Indiderum,
communion.
Indiderum,
Naph.
the small bit piece after Indiderum.
Okay, we call it naphora.
Oh, okay.
So as a reader in the church, I used to. It's not a big church, and back in the day there weren't many people around. So I used to be not in charge of it. It used to be part of my duty to cut up the bread into cubes. But like Saint Paisios said, people treated that with more reverence than people today treat the Eucharist.
Mhm.
So, and I think that's part of desacralization. It's this expectation of miracles being something grandiose and flashy, and it's not. The Eucharist is the biggest miracle we can imagine, because it's God becoming material. But to go back to our point about what also converted the Roman Empire, we have records of Romans being fascinated by the fact that Christians would only have one wife. Roman sexual mores were cruel, let's say that first, but very unusual to us. At the moment of a Roman getting married, it would be an expectation that the woman was a virgin and that the man wasn't. And mathematically, that produces a problem. Obviously.
Isn't that kind of what we see with the prescription of the red pill today? That's something I wanted to bring up.
I can give you a crude saying we have over here.
Yeah, I think we're probably more like ancient pagan Rome than we are like
paganizing.
Ancient, Christian Rome. I mean, we think and act like the ancient pagans.
Yes, but I think the way it's happening today is through pseudo-Darwinian channels mostly. It's a gamification of social interactions through a neo-Darwinian lens. That's how I see it. I might be wrong. I'm happy to have critiques hurled at me. But when you think about it, I think the one difference is no one expects even the women to be virgins anymore. Now it's even that is even weird, right? But definitely in the red pill or manosphere, whatever you want to call it, I hate those people more than the feminists, because at least the feminists, I know they're against me. These people are corrupting my own side, so to speak, in order to promote this demonic garbage. But that meant that there was an underclass of prostitutes, and especially young boys. Young girls, not so much. Those too, unfortunately, but young boys especially were seen as again, this is so completely demonic. It annoys me to no end and angers me to even contemplate. But it's what happened. It was always seen as a way of the adult man would make a man out of the boy by means of intercourse. But there was also a type of rejuvenation that the adult would receive from the young boy. We see that even in the Muslim world, although this isn't a teaching of Islam, it's just a failure of Islam to clamp down on this type of thing. Where this was a social norm, and you would have it arranged between like a friend of yours and your son. Do you know who David Wood is?
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's done a recent video on the incident with the men of Al-Zot in the life of Muhammad. But I would point you towards that if you'd like to investigate what happens. But we have so much poetry and prose from the Arab world pertaining to how beautiful young boys were. I think this is
as a classical homeschooler of many years, I was always pretty shocked to see Arabian Nights always on the classical list of good literature, because when you start reading it, it's horrific.
What?
Yes, but it makes the list because people have no discernment.
Oh, is it because it's old? So
it's old, you know, and you need things from different cultures, and even
good thing
that
never happened before. But
the systematic taking of someone's innocence is exactly what we were talking about in the modern era as well.
But
and this is absolutely demonic.
We have to realize from their perspective, it wasn't about innocence. That's how the demons trick them.
Right.
I'm not saying that's not the point of it. I'm saying the source is the demons, not them.
Right.
From their perspective, they're getting powers because I have no other way to quantify or qualify the fact that every pagan culture seems to diddle little boys than the fact that the demons convince men that doing so grants them power. Now, women, and therefore girls as well, little girls, are not as attractive a target because in most cultures, again, women were seen as trash. Like they're necessary, you need them, but they're dispensable. You have works of Aristotle who revolutionized the ancient feminism by saying women are actually human. They're just deformed humans. So every fetus strives to be a man, but about half of them fail. That was Aristotle's idea. So, but just having women be human was revolutionary. So we need to see that in perspective. That is something that forms how people would think in the ancient world. We always think again through Darwinian means. Right? Everything has to be Darwinian. And I still should do a stream on saying, I want to do a stream where I just say, give me any prompt and I'll give some type of Darwinian story as why any type of behavior is evolutionarily conditioned. Because you can, with opposite things. Allow me to entertain one. It's not, I'll be short with it because it's not pleasant to talk to women about this. But human females, are the only mammals that have enlarged breasts outside of nursing. And therefore, that makes it a counter-indicator of fertility. Because when women are nursing, they're not fertile.
Mm-hmm.
So breasts should be repulsive to us under the Darwinian model. Yet they're not. They're sort of the opposite. But it doesn't matter. They'll just think up a story. I remember
not really where I thought this stream would go, but you know.
Right. But unfortunately, we are pagan via means of Darwinianism.
I agree with you there. Yeah.
I remember this interview of Dr. James Torr, whom I follow for all sorts of things about abiogenesis. I suggest everyone follow him for that. But he was interviewing this biochemist Saigot, right? And he said he has an explanation as to why people bite their nails when they're nervous. He said, well, it's because when we're nervous, it means we're expecting danger. And by reducing the size of our nails, we're optimizing our manual dexterity and therefore our ability to wield weapons to defend ourselves. So the only problem with that theory is that he just made it up for the sake of it.
Mm.
Right? So that's how Darwinism works. And that's what we see with all sorts of ideological pulls, including the manosphere, including feminism, including everything. Everything has this little story about it as to why we are biologically programmed. And my whole bloody point is, when arguing with this, if it was biologically programmed, you wouldn't have to explain it to me. You know?
And yet, you know, I can, again, as a homeschooler, this is something I talk to my kids quite a bit about, because tend to be a young earth creationist, but it took me a while to get there, because you do have to kind of go through the arguments and figure out that it's all lies, evolution. But if you look at
Yes.
children's science books specifically,
Yes.
and these are the good ones that I'm trying to find, even there, every single book about a dinosaur starts with hundreds of millions of years ago, and it ends
Yes.
with, and people killed them all off, or, you know, something killed them all off, and we have to protect everything. So it's embedded in
It's a very
every single.
powerful story.
It is, and it's a constant drip. I try to tell people it's not that this book or that movie is bad, even though they are. It's the totality of the drip. You're in a thunderstorm and you don't know it, or in the ocean, maybe.
Yes, but it's such a powerful agent for the fabula of the thing, for the storytelling, because everything can be explained by it. And as I said, opposites can be explained by it, right? You can have an explanation as to why men prefer curvier women because it's an indicator of fertility, but then you also have an explanation for why they prefer like skinnier women. Women prefer men who are more burly, but then you also have an explanation why they prefer like more androgynous men. Like everything is encompassed by it in modern, and not just modern, but current events. I see this especially with like the war between Russia and Ukraine, where from Western media you see like Putin is both a godless heathen and a religious zealot. He is both a Soviet and a Tsarist. The Russian army is both completely incompetent and can't do anything right, and they'll be, dining in Paris in a week if we don't stop them. Right? Because the point isn't to give you a coherent narrative of what's happening. It's just whatever you can, throw it out so someone can latch onto something. When I went on Jay Dyer's channel, I gave explanations for why anything is dependent on the narrative, and he gave examples of why numbers are like that. Roman numbers he gave examples of letters, how they work in different languages. I gave every type of example, so because I was thinking maybe you won't get one, but you'll get some of them. And I think that's what's happening with the narrative generally. That's what's happening with Darwinism. That's what's happening with current geopolitical events. That's what's happening with everything. Because everything is so banal, or at least banalized. Not sure how to wear that. But everything has to be just as wide a net as you can cast. Because no one wants to create a succinct narrative. Because these succinct narratives, such as orthodoxy, have a very inconvenient side effect of alienating those who disagree with it.
Yeah.
And I think the lack of consistency, the lack of succinctness is what is driving a lot of the madness we see in the world today. It's all over the place because you just grab onto something. We know feminism is a problem. But that doesn't mean the manosphere is the solution, because the manosphere is another problem.
But don't you
But
think
people are
people's
confused.
impiety in general is the other side of that? Because it's not just that they have bad thoughts, it's that they're actually living impure lives. And then again, if you look at the pagan martyrs who converted, it often start with they were virtuous. You know, like St. Christina or St. Catherine in their towers, they kept themselves pure from the world. So I think these two things I don't think they can be divorced. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying you also have to at least struggle against your passions on a basic level.
Well, can I bring something up? This was from the book by Father Strickland. This is just writing about the conversion of Constantine. He says it is often asserted that the conversion of Emperor Constantine at this time was the event that caused the rapid transformation of Rome's religious demographics, resulting in an empire that was predominantly Christian within a century. But the historical record supports another interpretation. Christianity did not take over the empire because Constantine converted to it. Constantine converted to it because it was taking over the empire. What do you think about that? Because, yeah, obviously we do have a great conversion happening in the hearts of these pagans who may result from what we were just talking about, that there's just this chaos in understanding the world, but Christianity offered a completely different view of things, and especially, go ahead, Posh.
Yes, allow me. It was by no means profitable for Emperor Constantine to convert. Most of the early converts were slaves and women. And most of the slaves were also women. That's why we see such a disparity. Because, in the Greco-Roman world and broader than that, women were seen as a trash that Christianity granting the women the honor they deserve. Again, I'm not a feminist, but I'm not a Christian if I don't recognize the fact that women are made in the image of God, and that the holiest creature ever is the mother of God, herself the most holy Theotokos. So that's why you see the early ones. But it's not purely women and slaves. There's also, because men would be invested in the paradigm itself. And that's why we see people like St. Augustine, St. Procopius, again, my city's patron saint, who had a pagan father, wouldn't convert because, wait, I'm part of this. It's a great deal for me. But at the same time, we have aristocrats converting, like St. Valentine, right? St. Valentine, who's considered like the patron of marriage and love and such, because he was in Rome as an aristocrat helping young in the 2nd century, helping Christian couples flee Rome until he was discovered and brought before the emperor and beheaded when he tried to convert the emperor. I hate Valentine's Day for what it's become, because it's such a beautiful, beautiful story of Saint Valentine, and it's turned into this. Don't let me get all Balkan about it.
I agree with you, but yeah, it's a demonic.
Yeah, I love Saint Valentine. I just hate Saint Valentine's Day. Things can be said like for Halloween and Christmas and stuff. Like everything's commercialized. The demons are very crafty, and they don't care how you stumble. They just care that you do stumble. But again, so it's not just for the poor. It was for all sorts of people, and all sorts of educated people converted. What happened with Emperor Constantine, and I saw Matushka, I can't remember her name.
Constantina.
Okay. Matushka. That's the Russian way to phrase like a wife of a priest. But she asked about what was it? The conversion of Constantine? No, his baptism. He wanted to go and be baptized at the Jordan River, but he fell ill. So he abdicated the throne and spent the rest of his short life at that point, from that point on, in repentance and not wearing the royal regalia and everything. So extraordinarily Christian. Like, there are some writings of his that people just want to freak out about being semi-Apollinarian and stuff like that. But he was doing the best he could. He was literally the head of the Roman religion. He did not go and sacrifice to Jupiter after his coronation. And as we said, he broke the back of the pagan system by being the head of it. It's sort of like the Pope becoming Muslim, right? Sort of breaks the whole system. I think it's even worse than that, because the Roman Emperor was more prominent in the system than the Pope is in Catholicism.
So forgive me. Yeah, forgive me if I could jump in. It was when I said earlier, I was reading about the life of a saint that had a lot about the empire, kind of the background. It was actually St. Constantine, now that I remember. And so, again, don't believe what the world says about him. They slander him terribly, and Matushka is very fervent about this. Okay, so if you read his actual life in the Great Synaxarion, you'll see that, and it's very long. It's like 80 or 100 pages. It's very long. So I didn't get the whole thing for this stream, but it actually starts by calling him almost a new Moses, because while he was raised in the house of the pagans, his father had married St. Helen, but it wasn't an equal marriage. There were different levels of marriage in the Roman Empire. So she was of a lower status. So, she was kind of put away and kept in her village with Constantine growing up. And when the father rises to a level of authority, he brings them. I believe that's how it goes. But the point is, he was raised by his mother, who I thought was a Christian at that point. And it seems to be that as he grows older and older, it describes him as being like Moses in the house of Pharaoh, who, handsome, well-learned, pious, faithful. And that's why the other people there hated him. And that's why they tried to kill him and scapegoat him. It's a tremendous story. So you really have to go and listen to that. And, I'm always for going and listen to this church, not the world.
Just to be clear, he is the most recorded Roman emperor in history.
Really?
More so than any other. Because there was so much focus on him, there's controversy about him, etc. He he ordered it to have all the government offices shut down on the Lord's Day, Sunday, except the office of manumission. So the only thing, as far as the government is concerned, that you could do on Sunday is free your slaves. He also ordered it. He couldn't abolish slavery. I know there are Protestants nowadays who make a whole hubbub about, the biggest failure in Christian history is that the Council of Nicaea didn't abolish slavery. I don't know how they expect that to happen, first of all, because I think less than 5% of the empire was Christian, but the emperor was. But I think this is from the whole Protestant thing, especially American Protestantism is very influenced by Puritanicalism. So they hate governments and stuff. So they think that's a huge source of theories about Emperor Constantine.
And I think too, they miss that the the Gospels themselves say it doesn't matter if you're a slave or free man. The whole point, one big thing in the Gospels, it's for everybody. It's not about this world. And so while, there were many saints that freed their slaves willingly and with joy, that's not, we're not here for social revolution. We're not here to make this world a really nice and obedient and nice place to be. It's about the next life.
That's not the point of Christ's mission. His kingdom is not of this world does not mean that kingdoms of this world shouldn't be Christian. That's how a lot of Protestants take it. It's that
They can only be
ultimately,
Christian as the Christians are, though, right?
yeah, right. So there was nothing wrong with converting the empire.
Right.
The thing was that brings along its own problems, right? Corruption is going to be a problem in a different way than it was before.
Yes.
But that does not mean you don't get to have laws about abortion.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you know, I did want to bring up the whole topic of symphonia and Caesaropapism and stuff like that. But before we get to that, since we're kind of still on the topic of women, you know, we just mentioned Saint Helen. There was also the mother of Saint Augustine, Saint Monica. There's also the big sister of Saints Basil, I guess you could say, and Gregory. His sister, their sister, Saint Macrina, was a big teacher of them. And not to mention Empress Theodora. You know, she just
Empress Pulcheria.
she implemented a lot of changes for women, like we were just talking about. There's Saint Irene. She's a very interesting character, but she was like a hero against iconoclasm. And so I just wanted to kind of ask you guys, how do you square away the idea of patriarchy with the idea that we obviously have saints, female saints who were great teachers of great saints, great fathers of the church, and also were empresses and were considered heroes of orthodoxy?
Can I ask a question first?
Yes.
I know there's a lot of talk online about patriarchy. I sort of have listened to this, but tell me what you mean by patriarchy and tell me why these two things you just described cannot exist at the same time.
I don't even see a
I don't know. You know, as
Yeah.
you know, I'm newly Orthodox. I've been Orthodox for 5 years, and you know, I've been in these Ortho bro circles for a little too long. But it just seems like women cannot be teachers of the faith, and they cannot be in any position of authority. So, and it doesn't really line up with what I've learned in the lives of the saints. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I'm not trying to push anything. I'm not a crypto feminist.
I will say
but it's a little confusing.
I've been told to shut up online, so I get that. It definitely exists out there. Yeah, I'd love to tell the story of Saint Pulcheria, but if you want to start, Posh, I just want to make sure I get her story in.
Okay, so keep that in mind. I want to give more of a general review.
Yeah.
Throughout the Bible, there's a through line of God raising up women when men fail. The patriarchy is, again, not like the ontological aristocracy we talked about in Rome. It's not that men are ontologically superior to women. And I think God placed the most holy Theotokos in her station, as he did, to remind us of that. Women are not ontologically inferior to men. But when we read about Adam and Eve, what the whole thing is, when he says to Adam, "From the sweat of thy brow shall you eat," he says to women, to Eve, that women shall seek to be over men, but the men will rule against them. That's not a punishment. That's a mode of repentance. Like, no man sees, oh yes, woo, I get to go and till the soil. That's not exactly the most fun of activities if you've participated in it, and I have. But it's a mode of repentance. It's a way to stave off things, and men are put in charge. Absolutely, I'm not apologetic about it. But I've never even been in a relationship where I thought like you are beneath me. It's just like, no, I'm the man, I'll be in charge, and we'll have a reciprocity there. But God raises women up when men fail at their duty, because it's rulership in Christianity is a duty, not a privilege. As an emperor, as Saint Constantine was, he had his duties as an emperor, to whom much is given, much will be required, right? It's a position you're granted by God. Even for the pagans, right? As Christ says to Pilate, you would not have this position if my Father didn't give it to you. Like, that's what St. Paul reiterates in like talking about causing civil rebellions and stuff. He says, like, no one would have anything unless God deemed that it was necessary. That doesn't mean getting a better government. It means getting a government that would tilt towards more repentance. Sometimes that's very nasty, and we Orthodox know that well. Us cradle Orthodox, obviously different for people who convert from other places, but Muslims and communists and people who have martyred us for all sorts of reasons. But we have the wife of Moses stepping up to circumcise their children because Moses was too afraid to do it. she also does a bit of a power move and says, "You are my bride by blood." That's not that clear from most English translations because it's sort of euphemized. Lots of things are from the Old Testament, because the Old Testament can get rather raunchy, not in a fun way or something, but to send a message, right? When it describes Israel as a whore, and that uses certain phrases that we wouldn't see as proper, but the point of using such language is to send a message and not to obfuscate about it, beat around the bush. But it happens with Moses, it happens later on with Gideon, it happens with all sorts of people throughout the Old Testament who are sort of reticent, men who are reticent to do what needs to be done. And God would raise up women to do it because the men are failing. And that's sort of a shaming thing. You see, you could have done this, but you failed to. So I'll raise up a woman to do it because you're not man enough. But that's not in. I know people read this about like women can't talk about the faith and stuff. That's again, that's very modernist. That's almost like a Protestant thing. Like Protestant pastors are basically like that, to hold Bible studies every week. That's not what church is about. It is in low church Protestantism, especially. But women were usually in charge of educating the children because the men would be out there doing manual labor for the poorer classes, and for the upper classes, training for war, training for governance, etc. So women would be in charge of education and usually the budgeting. So this whole thing, I think, derives from something I've talked about, is that we see traditionalism as 1950s, 60s America in the suburbs, which is not traditional for all sorts of reasons, like historical reasons. We did, someone thought I didn't do any streaming, but I did with Baron Strawberry. But we talked about the fact that 1950s and 60s America was a golden age in large part due to the fact that every other major power in the world was demolished in the Second World War. So you couldn't, export all the jobs to poorer countries like it's happening nowadays. You couldn't do any of that. The infrastructure wasn't there in the other countries, even the rich countries. Like the European ones, let alone places that were just hellholes like India and China. I'd like to remind people that in the 90s, Britain had a higher GDP than China and India combined. But so you had this golden age, but that's not, you can't base your worldview and your mores and prescriptions off of a golden age that was very atypical historically. So that's how they view it, like sort of like the man can go outside. Like most men throughout history were out in the fields, like very near the house, and women would process things. And what I learned from Baron Strawberry, that in Ireland, when you had divorces, you're muted, Mella. You wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, I learned from Baron Strawberry too that before the Industrial Revolution, men were very near their homes, and they would actually participate in the education of the children, because part of that education was being out in the fields and learning to do things around the house.
Before industry, most production was at home, because that's what industry was for. It was producing things, and so it substituted for it. But what I learned from him specifically was when you had like divorce settlements, there was a difference between separating
divorce settlements when, Posh? In the 50s or
in
earlier?
Ireland, I can't tell you exactly which timeline.
But modern times?
More modern, but not nowadays. So prior to very modern times, but they would distinguish between processed and non-processed goods, because women were the ones processing goods. Right? So you get wool. Women would be the ones spinning it and turning it into clothing, as much as everything else. Men were in charge of doing the basic work, like gathering things, the fields and the animals. But women would be the ones turning milk into cheese. Women would be the ones creating clothing. People didn't go and buy clothes at a shop. They'd have it made at home by the women. So the processing was then exported to industry. And nowadays we forget that fact, and I think that's extraordinarily damaging to conversations nowadays. That they say, "Oh, women will stay at home." Yeah, but what they did at home wasn't just clean and take care of the children. They would be producing things that the men would be creating the primary resource for, like the raw resources for.
Right. I completely agree, Posh. And if I could jump in for a minute, I had this conversation with John Heers, because I kind of came to the same conclusion listening to a lot of the modern or the conversations right now around this issue. And people are not looking at it they're looking at the ancient world through the lens of the modern world.
Yes.
But if you listen to John Heers, he's really interesting because he's traveled and lived in actual what he calls old world communities, where they still have some bit of that ancient world in their community, right? And this helped me to switch to the old world, new world paradigm. And what I really, because, if I say on my channel, I'm kind of for traditional womanhood. Well, that has so many connotations on it. I'm really talking about old world womanhood, Christian old world femininity. Like, that's what we're talking about. And you're absolutely right. The women were not locked away. They were producing. Everybody was producing. The men.
And they weren't these cute little princesses.
Right.
I know my grandmothers.
Right.
Christina, maybe this is something that would strike you as well as it did me, and why I use it so much. My grandmother, we used to have chickens, and when it came time to slaughtering, my grandfather would do the slaughtering. I was chased by a headless chicken once, but the processing was done by my grandmother, and she wasn't some rube out in the countryside. She was a teacher. All both sets of my grandparents, as I like to phrase it, were in education, but they were from the countryside. And my grandmother would be gutting these chickens, and I remember being there. It smelled like god awful. It was in no way, shape, or form pleasant. Nowadays, when we say, "Oh, women do the cooking," we think of cooking as like baking cookies. Oh, you take some flour and some water and put in chocolate chips, right? It's like a fun little thing. But I like to cook. I do that because I like it. When you're dealing with carcasses and disemboweling and gutting, like chickens you slaughter yourself, you didn't just buy a chicken from the store. You have to gut it, and the innards have this undigested food in it, and it smells like hell. So it wasn't this cute little thing women did. And another thing I'd like to point out, because
I've processed a lot of chickens, by the way, and I can confirm all that. We do that. My husband or my older son does the deed, and then the
yes,
younger son and
you're the
myself
one. Do you pluck them?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You
We
pluck
pluck
them.
them. We've done
Yes.
mechanical and by hand. Ducks are very different.
Mhm.
If have you processed a duck
Ducks are
before?
different in many ways.
Yeah, but what we didn't think about as we were trying to scold them was that ducks float, people. Ducks float. So it's very hard to push a headless duck down into this boil. Anyway, it was pretty comical, but yeah, it's very messy. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, process is the nice word for it. But again, I think I joke about this thing when I say, like in Serbia, our women are more masculine than Western men and more feminine than Western women.
Yeah, it's so true. That's a great way to put it.
Yes, but that's because there's an artificial barrier placed for femininity, that it's about cute things, and it's
And
not.
weakness.
Yes, it's associated with weakness, and it's a very, very bourgeois, if I dare say so myself, risking sounding all communisty, but it's a very bourgeois, very rich way of thinking about things, because working class women weren't dainty. They were very hard, harder than men are nowadays, both in terms of dealing with these less than pleasant processes of food production. Go ahead.
Do you think that there's like a divide in just the times that we're in right now? Because I was just in Bulgaria a few weeks ago, and yeah, most of the older women are just very strong looking. Their hands look like they've been doing stuff, but the women are so feminine. Like the younger women are so feminine, and just it seems like they don't really. I don't know what they do there, but they just walk around and look nice.
Yeah, but that's part of modernization. I don't think the older women were a product of. I think there's a natural tendency for men and a natural tendency for women, right? And circumstances granting, they will follow those, right? So, especially young women, they like to look nice. They like to show a lot of skin. They like, because they want the attention. Men also want attention, and they try to achieve it by different means. I'm not singling out women for that. But the grannies you find in the world, they didn't grow up with that. They grew up with hard manual labor. I like to talk about my maternal grandfather. Like he grew up without electricity, right? So, and I remember back in like 2012 or so, he was talking over Skype with my an aunt, his niece, who was in America at the time, and when the conversation finished, he was sort of in awe. Like, I can't believe this just happened. Right? For me, it was no big issue, but he grew up without electricity and ended up talking to someone halfway across the world with a video call, like what we're doing now. So the circumstances in which they were raised were very different. Now, what we have in here in the eastern part of Europe is sort of what you had in the western part of Europe a while ago, but you just advanced more quickly. Or, well, you're not in Western Europe, but in the broader sense of what we mean by the West. it includes North America. But, our old people are still very traditional because they grew up in the countryside. And industrialization didn't come about yet. So even the young people, even though the women like to wear short skirts and men like to wear tight things and show their muscles and whatnot, even with that in mind, they would see something like LGBTQ as horrific. Like that doesn't come together. But I dread to think what will happen with the 2 generations after that. I'm very happy to report that our young people are also very conservative, probably more so than my parents' generation in a lot of ways. It doesn't seem like a product of just inertia. It seems as a product of rejuvenation of traditionalism. I think brought about by the death of communism, fully flowering now. Because people who are in charge of this country right now were all in the communist times raised and were members of the party and were conditioned by it.
I think as we are seeing this increased interest in returning to traditional ways, I think it's very important that we point the direction to how do we reclaim that, because we've lost it. It's not the last 20 years. It's, it's industrialization. It's a bunch of things that's happened. We've completely, we don't even realize how divorced we are from being old world people.
The internet, I think, is a bigger step than industrialization.
I agree with that. Yeah. But I think if you would ask me, like, where do you find model women to learn from? I think you have to start with the Panagia, the Most Holy Theotokos, and her life, which you can find. And then all of the female saints throughout history who have such a diverse background. You have queens and empresses, but you also have homeless people. There she is, Our Lady. You have harlots who have repented. You have people who have lived from purity, every age, from children to elderly. You will find a model there for your life in the female lives of the saints. So that those are the first 2. But after that, I think if you want to find old world women, you go to the monasteries. You go visit a women's monastery. And I want to say something about them because they all, obviously, they're living a spiritual life and they are becoming who God intended them to be in their own person, in their, who they are, Sister Maria or whoever it is. But as a woman, and you see a very specific women's spirituality being lived there. But the other interesting thing is that they do pray all day, but they also work very hard. And I live about a mile from a women's monastery with around 30 nuns. And it's been here, I think, about 30 years now. I think 1985 it was founded. And the incredible thing is how good these sisters are at what they now do, which is icons, embroidery, the sewing of vestments, jam, all the foods that they make. Like, there is such a very long list of things that they're very good at.
There's an expectations of monasteries to be monetarily independent.
Yeah,
because that allows them to be fortresses of orthodoxy.
That's right.
And completely, uncorruptible by if they're dependent on even the local bishop, which unfortunately can result in problems.
Yeah, and they're completely independent. But I think speaking as a parent, this is something I think we don't ever talk about, but we should, is that people need to develop their talents. God gave you talents, and nobody is developing their talents. All they do is sit online and talk about things.
The word talent is a weight of gold. So a shekel is a weight of silver. A talent is a weight of gold.
Yes.
And we have
the gifts that God gives you. Yeah.
Yes, it's the parable we have of the 3 servants. My good and faithful servant one,
right.
Which Protestants aren't very fond of, because it implies you have to do things and not just have like a mental flip switch, and you go to play a harp and not get pierced by a trident with a half goat man. But it's the talent is a gift from God. And there's a story of a man who from Greece who went to Mount Athos and to an elder, and he says to the elder, like, he says, "Father, I'm not happy. I have all of these talents, I have money, I have all of these things, and yet I do not find joy." And the elder tells him, "Well, as long as you think of them as your talents, you never will be."
Mm-hmm.
Because everything we have is a loan from God. Everything is, as in that parable. God has given you something. Double it. Double it. I've been given a gift for languages. I try to use it for good. Right. I try to use it to
Mm-hmm.
preach orthodoxy and for those who are already Orthodox to try and strengthen and deepen their faith. That's the best I can do with what I've got. But I didn't earn it. People have talents for music that I don't, even though I have this piano next to me. But I think that talents that you mentioned, Christina, if we see them as a gift from God, something that can be polished, because God gives us this raw material for certain things, some not, some are given to others. But if we see it as a precious gift that we can make better, that we can perfect, and God is with us every step of the way, right?
Yeah,
Again,
and we have a duty to perfect it.
Yes, because
to increase it.
The one in the parable who received the least did not double it, and that was his mistake. The ones who received more doubled it. One who received 10, he gave back 20. And he says, "A good and faithful servant." Right. So the point of that parable is whatever God gives you, do with that what you can. Try to do with that what you can. God loves our effort. We might not get the result that is great, but that's up to God. His providence is far beyond, our ability to accomplish something. But
and this is what you see in the old world women, in the sisters at the monastery. They develop their own talents, as Posh said, not for themselves, not for any earthly glory, but in the service of God and others. And it doesn't matter
that's
what
how
the
you get the
talent is.
most of it.
Yes,
Most
of
from
course.
it and of it.
And you will find joy in that because you are leading a life of purpose and direction. And I feel like so many young women, maybe the young men too, but definitely the young women are, what they do is they watch things online and they, consume. It's like, stop being a lazy slob. Like, get up and develop yourself. You have talents.
How pathetic is it that we see cooking as a hindrance or as some type of disgusting thing, which I completely disagree with. It's again, I like cooking. My mother, for example, doesn't like it. She does cook, not a fan of it. So I was happy to jump in because to me it's a wonderful process, and for everyone who thinks it's a girly thing, and this is actually a very important point. How a lot of the leftist garbage came into our societies is like, okay, so if I take a piece of meat and I put it on a grill, I'm a manly man. But if I sear it on a pan, all of a sudden, looking for a tutu to wear.
Yeah, Jim Bob on a stream was recently asking this question, like, is cooking feminine or masculine? I'm like, why are we even asking this question? It's food. We all have to eat it.
Jim Bob and I talk about it because he also likes to cook. He's Italian, so we can forgive.
Yeah.
But Jim Bob and we talk about food and cooking and stuff. But I'm like, I get to play around with knives and fire. I don't know why you would find that to be feminine. But again, it's not one or the other. The reason women would cook traditionally is because there weren't cookbooks. And most
you learned
people,
it. It was a learned skill.
It was learned as a craft by means of apprenticeship. So
Yeah.
girls would be with the older women in the kitchen learning the trade. Not as nowadays as I do. I recently got into making my own stocks, right? Like chicken stock and stock and stuff. But I Google it, right?
Yeah.
Not exactly a traditional tool of
Well, I want to finish my point, but you're sending me down a rabbit hole. I can't help, because it's my belief that something people don't realize is that we have lost so much knowledge and skills, but also relational knowledge from the lack of extended family. From when I was growing up, I was never around my extended family, but also now even more so the breakdown of the nuclear family. So you don't know how to be an aunt or grandmother or mother if you were never on the receiving end of those relationships. And so the act of the women getting together and making food, like for a festival, there's more to that than, oh, this is the job the men don't want to do. Like, they are bringing a craft that they have perfected, but they're also passing it along in this relational way to the other women.
Experience.
Yes, it's like these things are so necessary. So you need to go to your church and help out with the festival, not being online hearing me talk about doing that, right? So, but I did want to finish my point about the model women being the Panagia, the saints, the sisters, and finally the older pious women. Because as you mentioned, your grandmother, my own grandmother, she wasn't Orthodox, but she built her own house while she was pregnant, and my grandfather was away in the war. She's a very
my
tough
grandmother
lady.
was an atheist, just because I have to remind people we were a communist country from the Second World War up until the 90s.
Right, but they were tough women. They were not weak.
Yes.
They were.
But that goes more to your point.
Yes.
Because it was circumstances produce results, right? So she grew up doing all of these things, and my great grandmother and great grandfather on her side, they owned an inn, a tavern, whatever you would call it. So she would cook, right, professionally, and that was a. Sorry, just a minute. Someone's calling me.
Okay. Well, I'll go on. I wanted to tell quickly about my adopted Russian grandmother. This is a lady I met when I was about 18 or 19, and you might have a full story there. But we reconnected just a few years ago, and she got to meet my younger children, and she kind of set us down and served us some ice cream that she had made herself, from her own strawberries that she had grown. And she just told us about her life in Moscow she grew up under communism, but her family was extremely pious. And, it's not just about the stories, but it's about being with her, because she has such a presence about her. You cannot scare this woman. She, she was scared to go to church as a little child because, if you went to church on a feast day instead of going to school, you could get in a lot of trouble for this. And so she said one time she didn't go to church, and I think her teacher found her or something. Somebody said, just go. And she said, after that, I never worried again. And she just lived this life of faith in the midst of communism. And then as the communists were trying to rebuild, I think they were trying to build a Olympic-sized pool in where, is it Christ the Savior was blown up? It was Christ the Savior, right? Yeah. So she had an office. She was a very famous eye surgeon. She had an office across from there. And so every day she would watch, and the communists would say, well, we can't build it because there's certain fumes that come up. Well, by the power of God, the concrete would never set. So they tried to build this pool for many, many years. And she's watching this happen from her office. And then a few years later, the church is given back to the properties are given back to the church. And the patriarch, I think it was Alexei II, wanted to rebuild this church. And so she said he would come every day and walk through the construction site and bless it. And she just kind of smiled. This is my adopted Russian granny that I'm talking about, Posh. She kind of smiled and leaned back. She said, we had no problems building the church. Just like such faith. Like, why are you, she just always had this attitude, like, why are you worried? Like we're Christians. God is God. Like,
yes.
And then you need people like this in your life because it will just,
That's
it'll
like the
change you.
opposite story of the attempt to rebuild the third temple during Julian the Apostate.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Yeah.
I don't think I know that. I remember them
Oh,
trying to build it, or
yeah,
like the
Julian
Jews
the
coming to him.
Apostate was the nephew of Emperor Saint Constantine.
Mhm.
And here's the thing: he tried to imbue paganism into the empire, but he tried to systematize it, which was a huge problem, because paganism doesn't work like that. It's more of a free-flowing thing, right? It has no strict, outlines or anything. So they tried to rebuild the temple because, to him, a pagan, he wants to clamp down on these Christians by, rebuilding the temple for the Jews. What happens is you had earthquakes and fires breaking out.
Yeah.
And it failed completely.
Absolutely divine intervention there. Yeah.
Which is all over church history. So why are we worrying about things? Like, we shouldn't be worried about ecumenism. I mean, we should worry, but we shouldn't worry because
we should push back against
we should push back, but not worry. Like, God is God.
It won't succeed.
Yeah, like, have you not read the life of Saint Euphemia? Like, she's twice now has intervened. Like, what are we doing? Go home and pray.
Yes,
and pray for your bishops,
Right. We should absolutely pray for our clergy. It's almost pagan, by the way, to see them as like super special people who have super special powers, who can do super special things. Like, no. They are sinners just as much as we are. That's the whole thing about Christianity, and including within the biblical corpus itself. The Bible is so unique in the way that it doesn't portray people as some protagonists who have no fault.
Right.
Like
it's extremely honest.
Yeah. Yes. But again, it's very unique. The pagans don't do that.
Right.
Like they have someone who has a tragic end, but so I'm not saying everyone's perfect in paganism, but it's always like this glorious person who meets this undeserving end. We would say that about Jesus, obviously, but that was sort of intentional. God sort of planned it out that way. But when we read the saints, even from the Old Testament, like, who are the ones who fail the least? People like Elijah, Saint Elijah, or Elias, if relying on the Greek transliteration. But he at one point falls down and says, "God, take my life. I can't endure this." And he becomes weak in his spirit because everyone around him is converted to Baal worship. Right? This is a part that St. Paul quotes, by the way, in Romans, between chapters 9 and 11. Like, he invokes this, like a faithful remnant is kept. That's what happens with Israel. I told you I'm going to do a huge stream on Zionism. Like, the only difference between what God does to other ones who are sons of Abraham, because guess what? Abraham more than one son. You should at least know Ishmael, right? But if not Ishmael, then Midian, right? And you have the Midianites. Moses' wife was a Midianite. So there were other nations who believed in God. So it's not Jew or Gentile, right? It's sons of Abraham, and then the Gentiles are the people of the nations, which are outlined in Genesis. The only difference with Israel is that he wipes out most of them multiple times and then keeps a remnant. And that's what St. Paul quotes from Elijah, that he has kept 7,000 to himself, who did not bend the knee to Baal. But he is one of those, Samuel is one of those who are most pure, right? But he weeps for Saul. because Saul was so desperately lost, right? So there's never this pagan-like entity who never makes any mistake or anything, who only ever does glorious things, especially when we talk about like more secular people as opposed to the prophets. Like Moses kills a man, right?
Yeah. There's Saint Constantine.
Yes,
talked about him.
indeed.
He killed his wife and son. There's Saint Justinian. He massacred a bunch of innocent people, which is something I wanted to talk about, but I understand the nuance here. We are coming up on 2 hours. And yeah, like I said, there were other things I really wanted to touch on, but I don't know. I mean, this was such a great, duo between you guys, a trio to be technical. And I would love to do like a part 2 if you guys are down for that. But I do just want to say, this was such an awesome stream. I'm definitely going to go back and listen to it like more than once because, I am teaching this Lives of the Saints class to these, like, I think they're like 3rd graders now. And I definitely want to get a handle on the nuance of some of these points in history because as I was reading that book by Father John Strickland, I'm like, wow, I've never heard this stuff before. And it's kind of hard to reconcile it with, the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox faith, the fact that we've canonized these people who have been very, some of the things that they've done have been very problematic. I mean, just to name one, there was Saint Irene, who is the hero of, against iconoclasm, and she blinded her son. Well, anyway, I guess there's just some little sticky points there, but
we're always looking at it as modern people, though. We have to remember that we just do.
Yeah, I think that's really the through line of this whole stream. Is that the perspective? I
have to say this: saints are not saints because they didn't make mistakes, but because they repented. Some, and very few, are just holy through and through.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. Not all saints lived a completely holy life. Some are saints just because of how they died. So they're not all equal.
Solomon, King Solomon, throughout most of his life, was horrible.
Yeah,
I know the wise king split the baby, and we remember
that was my favorite story as a child.
Me too.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story in a sense, a bit dark, but there's beauty to it. Like the love of a mother is relied upon to deal with this horrible judgment that he proclaims intentionally. But he builds temples to demons. That's not good. I don't think. Like in Islam, he's lauded for his womanizing, right? Not in Christianity. So as I said, I work for the Crucible, and Andrew has to debate people, some of whom preach polygyny. And I talk about Solomon often because of that, and about King David, who, by the way, just keeps going off and off and off, and then falls off a cliff with the event with Uriah and Bathsheba. But we see these people as very flawed. Very, very flawed. Solomon himself, the wise king, does horrible things. And then I say, Deuteronomy 17:17 says, when you have a king, don't let him multiply wives. Right? So we have examples of polygyny. They're not endorsed by God. They're tolerated by God. But we have specific prohibitions. And yet we have people who then say, well, David had multiple wives, and Solomon had many, hundreds of wives and concubines, so we should... okay, so you've not been near a Bible. You just sort of picked up things. You haven't read any of it. And the reason it was prohibited was specifically what happened to both David and Solomon. Like, their heart will go astray.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
But because someone like Solomon, who later in life repents, that's why he is a saint. And King David repents, obviously, Psalms and everything gorgeous in terms of repetitive literature that we have, and Psalm 51 is a part of our daily prayers. But that should be a guiding stone for us. We have people who in modern terms suck much more than we do. Like Saint Paul literally led we call them like assaults against Christians.
Saint Stephen and Saint Peter denied the Lord.
Yes.
Like these are, anyone can repent. Judas could have repented if he had repented instead of being remorseful and actually repented.
Exactly, right.
And if you read enough of the lives of the saints, not just one or two, but make this a daily practice, hopefully, that you're gonna be able to see these threads through the lives of the saints, that they're not perfect.
You notice that the Bible continues on, not in terms of being Holy Scripture, but that what is happening in both the Old and the New Testament keeps on happening.
Yeah.
Because the church didn't stop at the death of St. John, the evangelist.
Yeah.
And it continues on to this day, and it's alive and well, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So what we should make sure to do is not fall away from it, because it's not going to die, but we risk with our daily lives, falling away from it.
Yeah, it's all a testament to the great mercy of God, I think, and I hope we can continue this discussion if you guys are down for that.
Yeah, I still had so much to ask Posh and to share with you guys. I did want to share the story of Saint Pulcheria, but the Empress. But I won't do it now. I'm actually going to read it because her feast day is in about 5 days, so you can look for that on my channel. The full life. And also, Mella, if you could link the St. Augustine life.
Yes, I will.
We didn't get to talk about St. Augustine, but this is like actually the one story I've been given an obedience to talk about. So the life of St. Monica. And I wanted Mella to link this specific one because it's actually very hard to find in English. The St. Dmitry of Rostov's collection, they never published the summer months. And so it's in June. So we don't have it in that collection. And strangely, it's not in the big Synaxarion. So this is a translation from the Greek Synaxarion of his life. And it's wonderful. It's not too long. You can read it in a few minutes, but it's enough detail to see. And St. Augustine, if you don't know his life, I think it will be difficult to understand maybe some of the controversies around him because he was such a prodigal son in many ways. He had illegitimate child and was into different
Saint Deodatus.
Yes. Is this another one?
Saint Deodatus?
Saint Deodatus, the son of Saint Augustine.
Oh, that's his name. Okay. It gave a different name. Okay, I didn't realize he was a saint. Wow. So
yes, he was a bishop as well.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Yeah, he was born in concubinage, and Saint Augustine named him Adeodatus, which means given by God. So I thought that was a beautiful part too.
So his life, the point I wanted to make with him is that we can't divorce like the conversation about the things that he says that are maybe a little problematic from his life. Like you actually need to get the full picture to understand. Like there's some things we say in the church, like I'm the greatest sinner. It's like, well, we can't all be the greatest sinner logically, right? Like, come on, but we should personally believe that, right? So we have to be careful that there are statements of piety and then there are theological statements. So I'm not an expert on this.
I talk about that all the time. Like the pre-communion prayer, like the sinners, the first of whom is me. Like we're at a literal place, all of us praying that we're the worst of sinners. And yet, that doesn't work out mathematically. But what does work out is the fact that perspectively, from the perspective of ourselves, we are the worst.
Exactly.
Right? St. Paul does the same thing.
Yeah.
Because it's not about statistics and charts. And if we pull out a chart of how many times you watched pornography, and this guy's watched more, and that's not the point. The point is healing, not getting points about anything.
Yeah.
There's no points in the eyes of God. There's only the heart, and how much you've purified it. Someone who has done a lot of sin but purifies his heart is better than someone who's done, smaller sins, lesser sins, but just ignores it.
Yeah, that's a very Western Catholic way of looking at sin, and that's kind of why I really wanted to talk about Augustinianism, and not to condemn the man, St. Augustine, who I've learned a lot about recently. Very amazing person. And anyway, I hope that this is a little teaser for a part 2, which I really think we should do.
He wrote a book of retractions.
Yes, I've heard that.
And people still quote things he said prior to that as Augustinian,
exactly,
even though he himself retracted on De Trinitate, on his work on the Trinity. He introduces the book by saying, no one should talk about this, but I have to because my congregants are restless, because this was the point at which the Ostrogoths were taking over the Apennine Peninsula. So it's outstanding how people misuse the poor man, especially for his theological errors, which he made. He himself admits that he made them, but it's very unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. I didn't want to belabor the point too much, but maybe we can kind of talk about it, because I do think it's important. I do think it's like a glaring issue for people just looking into it. So anyway,
you're having a special guest, are you?
Oh no, I was maybe, but he didn't show up. And we had a little bit of a panel change today, but I'm actually happy about that, because Posh, you are quite a full person here, and Christina, you've been awesome too. You guys are really great. I really hope we can continue this conversation. Thank you guys, everyone in the chat, for being here. Any last words from you guys before we end it?
Sounds like a threat.
I know.
Last words. Well, yeah, I had a great time, so I appreciate that. I'd love to talk about modern relationships between men and women with you, Posh, at some time. I have questions about that, and I'd like to hear your opinion on things. And I think we're on the same page with the church is the bastion of wisdom, and that's what we should be drawing from, not random people online. So I think there's a lot there to talk about. But yeah, anytime, Mella. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I think we should draw more from Charlie Kirk. I think he's the repository of great wisdom and traditionalism. Yeah. As far as my last words go, I always talk about in tangents, because I think everything is connected. And we've touched on some things. That's why we didn't maybe cover the breadth of what you wanted to, Mella. But definitely things always require depth. The breadth, better to understand a few things in depth than many things shallowly.
Yeah.
The superficiality is the illness of our time in all sorts of things, even secular things. At least that's what I've found in my experience. But definitely read the lives of the saints. I know everything, as Christina mentioned, everything sounds sort of the same as if you just have a very superficial understanding of it. When you read into their lives, you have people who were holy throughout, people who were very sinful and then, repented. You have all of these factors working together, but the essence of everything is that God seeks the man's heart, right? Even I make a big point of this because, again, even our popular culture, that affects the Orthodox world, the cradle Orthodox world as well, says some things like God wanted animals to die instead of people, like this, the whole penal substitutionary atonement rubbish. Unfortunately, there are people who convert to Orthodoxy and try to push that complete nonsense. This isn't the place to address that now. In complete contravention to the Old Testament corpus. And how I try to tell people that is when Christ himself, as God, becomes man and comes down and talks to the Pharisees, he says, you're neglecting the greater things of the law. Things like mercy and compassion, etc.
Yeah.
That's not a new accusation. Basically, everything Christ says, including like love your neighbor and stuff, that's all in the Old Testament. I know people have some pseudo or crypto Marcionite views, like, we had this God in the Old Testament, he was sort of a meanie. Nowadays we have Jesus and he's nice. That's
I hate that
rubbish.
view. I hate that view so much.
Oh, yes. One of the worst heresies.
Yes. I would recommend anyone read, the church's version of the life of St. Moses, the prophet, Joseph of Egypt, the patriarch. And you will see Christ in these figures over and over. There's so many types of Christ in the Old Testament because one type can't fit all of the glory of Christ.
No. Everyone has their gift, as St. Paul says. Everyone has their gift. Some also mentions like members, right, of the church. Some are more eyes, some are more feet, some are more this or that. Everyone has their place. But I wanted to mention the first chapter of Isaiah, when God says, like, stop your sacrifices, because I'm full of fattened, oxen, etc. I'm full of sacrifice. Because if you want to actually worship me, he says, and I use this to bring it up just to read that one verse, because I find it so compelling. This is Isaiah 1:18. No, sorry, not Isaiah 1. What was I thinking? Damn it, I can't remember now. 17, not 18. Okay, my mistake on that end. He says to people who want to actually worship him, he says, learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. So I missed it by one, but sorry. But what he says to them, to the Israelites, he says, yeah, you're still doing like the ritual aspects of things. That's supposed to point you towards how you should behave. He says, you're not taking care of the widows. You're not taking care of the orphans. You're not taking care of the poor. You're not taking care of people who suffer. And I am their God. So you're not taking care of me. And that is what should be the through line. That's a huge thing against penal substitutionary atonement. Because you would think if you're more sinful, you should sacrifice more in that system. But God says, yeah, I literally do not care if you stop sacrificing. If you're not doing the things you're supposed to do, I don't care about your sacrifices. Yeah. And I think that is such a fundamentally Orthodox message to say.
And we make it so much more complicated than it is. It's like, go to church, go to the liturgy where God comes down from heaven, even though you don't see it because you're, a sinner like me, but he's there. Yeah. Read the lives of the saints, pray.
Distracted. You may be focused more on the choir singing, and we have a beautiful composition like in Serbian from the 19th century. Like I often find myself focused too much on the music instead of the literal miracle in front of me.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to share this story, Mella. Forgive me. It'll just take a minute. But this is Bishop Irene in Western Europe, Posh. He tells this story of he had an altar boy in the altar that was a little bit naughty, and he was trying to get him to, behave a little better. This is church. And so he said to them, to the little boy, if you stand, very, very still and you focus, maybe you'll see the Holy Spirit come down. And he was kind of teasing the boy, like, And so during liturgy, the boy stood there perfectly still, staring at the altar. And Bishop Irenae's like, well, I did a pretty good job there, like got this kid to, to behave. And he asked him afterwards, kind of jokingly, did you see the Holy Spirit? He said, yes, but you didn't tell me it would be so beautiful.
Oh.
Wow.
It's not a joke. Like, this happens every Sunday, guys. Like, what are we doing? This isn't hard.
And as someone who has served at the altar for quite a while now, since I was in high school, I've not seen it once. But miracles are there for those who are weaker faith. And I'm not saying, therefore, believe everything blindly, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone can do that. But we should not rely on such, exceptions. Because we have such a beautiful liturgy connecting heaven and earth. We don't need fancy schmancy things. So I hope people understand from all that we have said. Like we've gone down rabbit holes and mentioned some not pleasant things, but unfortunately, I think sort of like with sexual mores, unfortunately, when we don't talk about them, sort of the only people who do are the degenerates. And I don't think just avoiding topics helps things. And if there's any evidence that it doesn't, it's been the last couple of decades throughout the world. And but it's just that strive towards God. Whatever happens, strive. If you should falter, get back up, continue on, pray for assistance from God continuously. Without him, nothing is possible, but with him, nothing is impossible.
Right.
So just it's so annoying to me to try to talk to people because demons, again, care that you stumble. If you should stumble by being proud of not committing sin, right, in some interpretation, like the Pharisees were, like, thank you, God, for not making me like the tax collector, right? The demons aren't going to be, saddened by it. They're like, yeah, go ahead, mate. You're so great. You're crushing it.
A priest once told us that the demons are the only ones who nudge you to do something evil and then throw it in your face when you do it.
Yes. That's a great summary of it. Oh, what's wrong with it? Oh, what's wrong with engaging in some type of sin? What's wrong with it? Come on, like everyone does it. Whatever happens, the logismi that you encounter in everyday life. But when you do it, like, no one is ever going to forgive you for this.
That's right.
You are never going to get away from you. Who are you? You foul creature. Because it's a 2-in-1 for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't fall for it. God is more merciful than the demons are, aggressive or cruel. Don't worry about them. They're a bunch of F-slurs.
This stream is a little bit like the liturgy in that when you hear the deacons say, and let us complete our evening prayer or our, prayer to the Lord,
yes.
We just keep on going,
And it's like
it's a 20-minute warning.
Well, there's so much to be said, and you guys are so awesome at it. I do just have one final note. Everyone, please, on Amazon, go check out Runes by Dangerfield Henley. This is Baselin Analyzer's new published book. It's a book of poems. It's really great so far. So please, guys, go check that out on Amazon. Thank you guys. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Posh. I hope to talk to you again soon. Jim Bob was just in the chat. I really want to talk to him one day, so I just want to put that out there.
He said I look like a lesbian
Oh,
with my
did he?
glasses.
I didn't see that chat, but yeah.
No.
Thank you, everyone.
That's private correspondence. He called me a lesbian.
Oh, okay. There you
That's
go.
what friends are for.
I'd like to say
Yes.
could grow way better facial hair.
Yeah, I think you can rely on Jim Bob to be very honest. He seems like that kind of guy. So yeah. Thank you everyone in the chat. This was such an awesome conversation. Like I said, I hope to do another one. And everyone have a good evening and good day. Goodbye.